this was a team I thought that our fan base could really get behind and be proud of.
Welcome into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast, following the beat of Husker basketball. Here are your hosts, Blake and Mike.
Nebraska takes care of their final non-contest, beating South Carolina State 91-62. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. My name is Blake, here again with co-host Mike. And Mike, this was a pretty easy one in general, but now that you're back and finally in your home studio, how was your trip up north? Let's break it down a little bit.
Pretty great, honestly. Got a chance to go into the office for the company I work for. They have an office up in Minneapolis, so got to go there, meet some people there. That was pretty fun. Got to go to a high school basketball game. Got to see a guy that's taken a visit to Nebraska. I'm not a recruiting expert, but based on his shooting, I would recommend it's a no take from Nebraska. He's 6'7" and he's a point guard. So at the high school level, he drives by and lays it in over everybody, but you can't exactly do that at the next level. So, but no, it was a good trip. Glad to be back. Glad I was able to, finagle a way to record a couple episodes up there off the phone. But yeah, good to be back in the studio with the headset and the mic and the computer screens and everything that makes this so much easier than looking at my tiny little phone.
And I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say the mic quality is a million bajillion times better. So much better produced now, but glad we can still make things work. So Mike, let's get into this really quick. South Carolina State, like I said, we talked about it pregame, not a very good team at all. This is a bottom of the barrel, 330 some squad on Ken Palm. Nebraska wins 91-62. Starters only played really about 10 minutes. Did you have any major takeaways there from the first half or from the game in mass?
It's obviously no masked again, so good to see the guys come out with some fire compared to the last game, because I know we said the same thing about this South Carolina State team that we had said previously about North Dakota. They're not a good team, 300 Ken Palm, we should easily roll them. But to see the guys come out hot and take care of business, that was kind of my big takeaway. I think they only gave up 11 points in the first half. It's the fewest, I think we had talked about, this fewest allowed in PBA history in a half. So pretty impressive showing on both ends for the fellas. What was the score at halftime here? It was 50-11 at half. So at that point, pretty well taken care of. That was my biggest takeaway. They came out with some energy. They weren't flat at all.
And they've had a problem with that in the past. As of recent, the second half obviously has kind of been the more fortuitous half for the Huskers. But Sam Hoiberg had a quote post game that talked about how they emphasized coming out strong.
Yeah, that was the message, because last game, obviously, we came out really sluggish and got down 10 in the first half. That was just our goal this game, was just step on their neck from the beginning. And we did a really good job with that. Now we're just trying to learn to continue to pound on them once we get that lead, and they beat us in the second half. That was pretty rough end of the game for us, and we know that it wasn't good, and we're going to learn from it. But as far as the start of the game, we're really happy with what we did.
And Mike, I think at one point the game was somewhere around 23-3. So this game was a total YMCA noon ball mismatch from the very get-go.
Yeah, it's I like Sam said, I like the killer mentality that they kind of got going on there. Step on their necks, pound them real quick, and just put the game away. So it's obviously he wasn't happy with getting beat in the second half. I'm not sure any of the guys were, but when your 11th, 12th, 13th guys off the bench are getting pressed, it's at that point I'm not sure why they're pressing when you're down that much. But hey, more power to South Carolina State. Pleasure to have them in Lincoln. Hope they had a good time. Unfortunately, the game didn't go the way they probably hoped, but that's good news for the Huskers. Another big takeaway for me, I know I was looking through some fun stats, and the Huskers had another run here, and they started the game 12-0 run, and that was the 10th double-digit run of the season, and then there was two more in the game. So the Huskers have now had 12 double-digit to zero runs through the season, which is always fun, because I always felt like, especially in the past, the Huskers were on the receiving end of that, where we go cold shooting and don't score for 5 minutes, whatever. But to be on the giving end of that and go on a double-digit run, it's very, very fun. I would love to see them keep doing it.
And you mentioned some of the scoring droughts that we've had in the past. The Tim Miles, obviously, signature 6 to 7 minute scoring drought in the second half.
Yes.
You know, we don't see much of that anymore. And I think a lot of that stems from us having a wide variety of shooters on this team and on this roster, highlighted by obviously Bryce Williams, who went for 16, 7, and 1 in only 20 minutes of play. Shot 5 for 10 from the field, 1 for 4 from 3-point, and he took the reins early and didn't look back, Mike.
I think I've said it many times. I think he's probably our most well-rounded scorer on the team, and it's good to see him come in, have an efficient night. Like you said, 5 for 10, shooting 50% from the field. We'll take that any day. Yeah, for 16. Another guy I'm sure you'll get into maybe is Wilcher. He had a great showing, and I think that goes back to what Coach Hoiberg had said, a couple weeks ago, that how good he was shooting it in practice, that it's got to translate to the game at some point. And I think we've seen that in the last couple of games. And I'd love to see CJ carry that forward into conference play, I hope.
And Wilcher with a stat line of 18-2, did not have an assist, but shot 7 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from deep in only 18 minutes played. He was super efficient. And Mike, I've really loved the player that he's become. I forget where I heard it, but Wilcher has done a great job of playing and evolving into what his role is. And now we're seeing some of the fruits of that labor pay off because he's now finishing a lot more inside. We've seen him cut to the basket a little bit more. And more than anything, Mike, his 3-point shot looks as good as it's ever been.
Yeah, I was reading an article this past week from just, CJ Wilcher talking to the media, and his minutes have, obviously he was a starter last year and he's coming off the bench now, so his minutes have gone down a bit. But I think his 3-point shot is up like 5-7 percentage points, something like that. He's up around 37-38% right now, which is incredible. We love to see that. And as you mentioned, I think, is scoring inside, but he's just, he's a good spark to come in off the bench. He's been doing what he's been asked to do. Obviously, like I said, his minutes cut down, so it's a little harder maybe for some guys, but he's really handled it well to come in and be more efficient than he has, I think, any time in his Nebraska career. We can't, overstress how great it is to have a guy like that, kind of he's a junior. He's been around the program for 3 years now, some veteran leadership to come in off the bench and kind of give a spark out there on the floor. He's been great for us. Yeah.
A couple other guys of note. Boogie Coleman gets an extended run of minutes, getting 8 points, no rebounds, and 6 assists, shooting 3 of 7 from the field, 2 of 5 from deep. Only played 19 minutes, but he got a pretty good audition, if you will, Mike. And Fred commented on the play of Boogie Coleman there throughout the game.
Teron had a great week of practice, and we were prepared to throw him out there, and I thought he gave us a really nice lift with 6 points and 3 assists, I believe he had in the first half. Hit both his threes. As I told him and talked to him, just be ready. Your time's going to come again. And the way he practiced, he deserved the opportunity to go out there in the first 10 minutes of that game, and he took advantage of it. So, he's a veteran guy. And the turnover, I think Boogie had 6 turnovers, but those weren't all his fault. And he's out there, with guys that haven't had a lot of minutes. So, he's going to be an important part of what we do the rest of the way.
And Mike, he's clearly come a long way in just a small amount of time after having 4 turnovers in something along the lines of 6 to 8 minutes against Minnesota. Kind of, started the snowball that second half was. But did he play himself into a larger role as we go into conference play?
Well, from what it sounds like Coach Hoiberg just said there, I would say, it sounds like he's been performing pretty well in practice, and I think he gave a good showing here. Obviously, as you mentioned, 6 turnovers isn't exactly what you like to see, but yeah, a good run of, double-digit minutes there for him. Yeah, 8 points, 6 assists. To have a guy that can come in off the bench and give 6 assists would be huge for us. I know we've kind of been asking again and again, we're our true point guard. We don't have one. How are we going to handle this type of stuff? So if Boogie Coleman can keep doing what he's doing in practice and translate that to the game, I think just from what Fred said there, he's going to be a big part going forward. I think he says that about pretty much everybody we bring in off the bench, but I think it's true. I think, as we mentioned, especially at the start of the season a lot, we're a pretty deep team. And if you have pieces that are performing well in practice and they can translate that to the game, just all the better for you come conference play when the wear and tear comes and maybe some guys need some extra minutes off as far as your starting 5 goes, and being able to have guys come in and give good performances and not see a big drop off would be massive. So I'd love to see him keep it up. I hope he gets some more minutes and can prove, where he's at right now.
Alec, another starter that got a decent amount of minutes, going for 10, 7, and 4, goes 4 for 4 from the field, so 100%. He feasted on the lower competition, had a plus 30 and plus minus, which is the highest on the team. So that's really good to see from a guy that isn't going to be your leading scorer, that can contribute to really good defensive plays, energy plays, as he's kind of become trademarked himself for. Elsewhere, Eli Rice goes for 10, 2, and 1, goes 2 and 8 from the field, 2 of 6 from deep, playing 24 minutes, which was the highest on the team. Had 4 fouls, so you kind of saw there where we've talked about, Fred has talked about, everybody's talked about his defense still a little bit lacking, but good to see him finally get an extended run to show off his abilities.
I couldn't agree more. I've been hoping to see him get some more minutes. Good to see he could get in there. I know he's come in a couple times in some, like the K-State game, Michigan State game, and hit a couple big threes for us. So, but yeah, to see him get an extended run here, yeah, like you said, 24 minutes, most on the team. If he can get some experience, I know it's lower quality opposition, but nothing can compare to actual game experience. You can practice as much as you want, but to get in and have game experience, huge for him. Obviously, still steps to be taken on the defensive end. I think I've been fairly impressed. This wasn't his best showing, as you mentioned, those 4 personal fouls, but I've been fairly impressed by what I've seen from him when he has come in. And I think obviously he's shown that in practice for coach to give him some minutes in the game. And I hope, he can keep contributing, maybe 5-10 minutes going forward in conference play, maybe be a spark off the bench for us.
Matar Diop goes 0 points, 4 rebounds, no assists. He did not make a buck in this one, but he's kind of showed us that he's a very big offensive development piece, kind of playing the Blaze Cater role a little bit. Hopefully we can see him back this year. I know, some of the coaches have talked about maybe potentially redshirting him, or I don't know entirely what all that looks like from an eligibility standpoint, but Diop is going to have to be our emergency big man, which parlays into the next topic, Rink Mast. We still do not have an update on his health. Fred Hoiberg was non-committal on saying whether he was going to be available for the Indiana game. So we're obviously hoping that he's playing with us. We're going to need him for a very physical team, which we'll get into. But the last thing, Mike, I wanted to talk about was we didn't see any Ramel Lloyd minutes. Now, there was a big stir about, is he going to come back at semester? There were stirs of potentially, him transferring. He is back with the team, but not seeing any minutes. So it's very confusing to fans and people outside the program. It's hard to understand what exactly is going on there.
Yeah, I wish, I could be a fly on the wall sometimes and get a little bit more inside scoop on exactly what's going on there. It's good to see he's still with the team, though. I think that's good signs. You always hate to have people transfer out mid-season, but everybody back at semester here is good going forward. And I guess we just have to be patient. Rumors can swirl and everything can happen as far as that goes and what people say. But all I can say is I'm glad he's still with the team, and maybe we'll get a chance to see him going forward. Maybe not, but it is what it is, and just got to be patient waiting and see what comes of it.
So rounding out the South Carolina State recap, the Huskers win 91-62, shooting 48% from the field on 29 of 61, 30% from 3, going 9 of 30, and shoot 75% from the free throw line on 24 of 32. And they have 22 assists to 20 turnovers against the South Carolina State full court press nonstop. We talked about, in the preview episode, they do turn the ball over from the opposing defense quite a bit. South Carolina State, on the other hand, shoots 31% from the field on 23 of 74 shooting. It shoots 22% from 3 on 5 of 23 and 73% from the stripe on 11 of 15. And they have 9 assists to 19 turnovers. And a fun nugget that we found out, South Carolina State's 11 points was the second lowest first half opponent total in PBA history. And to my knowledge, the second lowest total ever. 2 points past Jackson State in, I believe, 2009, I think, what we talked about off the air. So obviously a good tune-up for the Huskers as we move on. And the fans had stuff to share on Twitter as well, so let's get into that.
So Husker fans, let's hear from you.
So with the game being broadcasted on Big Ten Plus, I'm sure there weren't a ton of live viewers, and those that may have been listening to the radio broadcast with Kent Pavelka, follower of the show. Don't know if he's tuning in or not, but does follow us on Twitter, so very neat. But breaking into some of the things that you guys said, Ben Simmons Jumper says, it would have been nice to see more second half minutes for Tominaga. He didn't have the ball enough in what could have been a get-right game for him going into Big Ten play. And, Mike, I don't know that it's fully concerning because we know the kind of shooter that Tominaga is, but do you have any kind of concern or doubt that maybe he's taken a step back this year? Because I think in this game, I don't have the box score in front of you. I think he only had 5 to 6 points and really didn't take many shots either.
Yeah, I'm not too overly concerned. Obviously, like you said, we know what type of shooter he is. He can get hot at the drop of a hat. So not too worried. Obviously, it's easier to get in a rhythm when you're shooting the ball a lot, and we've mentioned before in the podcast how that was kind of his role last year, and now this year he's gonna probably not get as many opportunities to shoot the ball. So not too worried necessarily. I don't think, especially in a game like this where it's out of hand quick. I think the potential risk of keeping your starters in, any sort of injury, bless the knees and ankles always, but any sort of risk like that definitely outweighs the benefit of getting extra shots up in game time. I mean, these guys are what, 12, 13 games in now. So if they're not used to the game pace, especially for a starter like Tominaga, I don't really understand why they wouldn't be. So I'm not necessarily overly concerned personally, but hopefully, he can, when his time comes and he does get more shots up, they'll fall like we're used to seeing.
Andrew Hansen says the main rotational players all played pretty well for the most part. It was good to get a lot of bench guys, a lot of minutes. However, it was pretty easy to see why they're bench guys. And he's kind of referring to the late second half not fall apart from the Huskers, but I believe they won on like a 15 or 16-0 run or something when we had all of our deeper depth and bench pieces in. And obviously they're not going to be, NCAA caliber level or anything like that, but you would have liked to see him play a little bit better. Obviously not to the level of our starters, but more than anything, I'm just glad they got minutes, Mike.
I'd agree with you there. It does suck to give up a run, give up some points there, and I know it's tough when like you said, your bench pieces are getting full court pressed, but that's kind of what that team does, and it's hard to see because I feel like breaking the press is something you learn very early on in basketball, but I guess that's me saying that as a 27-year-old bum talking about Nebraska basketball, not out there having to actively do it against, Division I athletes. So not going to take it away from the guys. It's a tough position to be in, especially when you haven't had a lot of game minutes. So I think it is good to get those bench pieces some minutes. It helps developmentally. It helps everybody. Everybody loves to see those guys get in. They work their tail off, in practice all the time. So to get them in during game time, I know everybody loves to see that. It's just it's a real benefit.
Huskers Oracle says, always nice to have a laugher to get everybody involved up and down the bench. Question to ponder, is Boogie back in Fred's good graces? It would be great to have more guard depth with our upcoming schedule. And for me, I think with Boogie, it's always been a matter of can he bring the same level of intensity throughout the game? We've kind of seen little spurts of spots where he gets a little lackadaisical with the ball, gets turnover prone quite a bit. But at his best, he's one of the flashiest players on our roster, Mike. So what's your take on Boogie? Again, we talked about does he have a role, as we get into conference play, but is he going to be more of a reserve backup piece, or do you think he can, log 10 minutes a game?
Oh, I think he could. I definitely think he can carve out a spot. And I think this is, kind of an interview, a chance to show what he's been doing in practice ever since, he's been out of the rotation for a bit now, but to get a chance to get in during the game and show what he can do. And I think he had a pretty good showing. It sounded like in Fred's post-game presser there, he'd mentioned the 6 turnovers, but he said, not all those were his fault necessarily. He's playing with some guys that don't get a lot of minutes, and that kind of makes it tough. So to me, that reads, if I'm trying to read the tea leaves here, it reads a little bit like maybe coach will give him some more minutes to run with some guys towards the top of the lineup and see how he does there. And I'd love to see him get some more minutes. You never want to see a guy, highly touted coming in here as a transfer. You never want to see that type of talent, kind of waste away on the bench, because he is incredibly talented. But as you'd mentioned, it's the turnovers are the issue, and it sounds like he's doing better with that at practice. So maybe we'll get a chance to see it in conference play.
Evan Strongwater says to end up with only a 29-point win is a little disappointing. We played a lot of developmental pieces, but was hoping for an even more dominating win. I think we showed in the first half that our top 7 or 8 guys can play without Mass, but I can't wait to have him back. And Mike, again, we'll kind of get into our Indiana breakdown here in a little bit, but Mass is going to be a very, very, very big key piece for our Big Ten schedule going forward, most specifically with Indiana, kind of in how their play style will match up against us. But it was good to see, at minimum, that this team can play well without Mast on the court when need be.
For me, there was definitely questions after that North Dakota game, seeing how they came out. As it's obviously kind of a bit of a letdown spot right before holidays and everything, but maybe the worry in my mind specifically was, if they can play without masks, because it did not look good for a lot of that game, let's be honest. So to see him come out and handle business without him, obviously love to have him back. Hopefully, he's recovering well from surgery. It sounds like he was doing some action on that leg now the last couple of weeks in practice, or last week in practice. So not running full time from what I understand, but maybe, that's been a week now, and with the modern medicine they have and surgical, recovery they have, who knows? Aaron Rodgers was flirting about coming back from an ACL tear 3 months later. So a minor knee surgery. Hopefully we can get that healed up and get ready for Big Ten play. But yeah, that's my big takeaway, is the guys looked real good without him. Love to have him back though. So hopefully, he heals up pretty quickly here.
Huskin Fanatic says, still bummed about Tomonaga's year 2. Watching the game was thrilling in the first half and defeating after they outscored us in the second half. I get playing reserves, but it took the wind out of the fans. And the one thing I will say is that more than anything this program has lacked, or where this program has lacked in the past, is the ability to play those developmental pieces, because we've seen in years past that we've lost to, the list goes on and on and on over the past couple of years, but we've lost to Utah Tech. I think we've lost to Incarnate Word. We've lost to UC Irvine. I mean, we've lost to these teams before. So to just be on the other side of this and be able to see these depth pieces play extended minutes, not just the last 2 minutes of the game, I think is promising. But the one thing I will say, Mike, is I really wish we could have hung on and won this game by 40, because as we've seen and talked about a little bit, if you can destroy your lower level opponents by 30 to 40 plus, you do usually see a little bit of a bump in the net. And unfortunately, we weren't able to keep that lead.
I know that's kind of been the takeaway. I know the last two replies that you'd mentioned there were a little disappointed by the lack of I don't want to call it a lack of a blowout, because I think nearly 30-point win is still classified there, but it wasn't 40. It wasn't as big as it could have been. And as you said, it definitely would have helped in the net. I'm still a little cautious about buying too much into the net just coming into the new year here. I think it'll definitely have a little more weight come, mid-February, when there's been a lot more conference games playing. But you're right, a big win over your lower quality opponents definitely helps with a bump there. And I think we'll definitely still get a bump. We handled business pretty well, but I think the biggest opportunities as far as net ranking goes is going to come in conference. So I'm not too overly concerned about this. I was just happy to see the bench guys get some minutes personally.
And rounding it out, Twins fan C4 says, short and simple, what the hell is going on with Ramel Lloyd? And I wish we had an answer. If I had something to share, I gladly would. We're still pretty new to the whole, Nebraska basketball media, so I wouldn't say we have great sources or anything like that. But the biggest thing in question to me is that he's been, regarded as a very high-level 4-star guy, and it's just shocking to me that he's seen either – a lack of development or a lack of trust with the coaching staff. And you could say a million things, but, it could be as simple as something that, like we've seen with Eli Rice, maybe his defense isn't as capable as it needs to be. Maybe his shooting has just been really off. It could be a million things, Mike. And I wish I had an answer, but I think the only people that have an answer are Ramel and Fred.
I think you're spot on with that. I think only those inside the program, and even then a very select few, probably knows what's going on with that, and would love to pick coach's brain and figure out what's going on with it. And even at that point, if we got a chance to talk, it might be some coach speak. So who knows what's going on. I think everybody's anxious to see what develops with that. But as I said earlier, when we kind of talked about it, just going to have to be patient and wait and see. So
that rounds out our segment. Let's hear from you. Nebraska obviously gets a really nice record rolling into conference play 11-2, and we'll break down Indiana on the other side of the break.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
So, Mike, let's get into our Indiana preview. But before we do, this segment is sponsored by TBC Tax.
Yeah, this portion of our show is brought to you by Tax and Business Consultants. They're providing all of the tax, accounting, payroll, and consulting that your business needs. They partner with you to specifically tailor strategies suited to you and your business. Committed to positive client outcomes since 1961, they've been relieving stress related to taxes in all forms. Their offices are located in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons. So give them a call at 402-426-4144 or visit their website at tbc.tax. That is T as in Tominaga, B as in Bryce Williams, and C as in Coach Hoiberg.tax. Once again, that number is 402-426-4144, so give them a call. Everybody with Tax and Business Consultants wants to wish you a Happy New Year and go Big Red.
So with that being said, Mike, let's get into Indiana. Indiana 10-3 on the year, 2-0 in conference. Ken Palm checking in at number 87. As of my writing this, which I believe was yesterday morning, their net ranking is 102. Preseason, they were picked 6th in the Big Ten. Notable wins for the Hoosiers include number 63 Michigan on the road, 78-75. Number 72 Maryland at home, 65-53. And a little bit of a closer one, Morehead State, number 138 in Ken Palm. They sneak out a 69-68 victory. And if I remember correctly, I think they were actually trailing that one for a pretty good portion. So maybe a little weak as of late. Notable losses, lost a really close one to number 16 Kansas at home, 75-71. Got blown out by number 11 Auburn on a neutral floor, 104-76, and lost a game to number 5 UConn on a neutral court, 77-57. So maybe not obviously playing well against the higher tier opponents, but did almost get Kansas at home, so something of note. Offensively, they check in at 88th in the country. Defensively, 89th. They play at the 105th tempo. Their free throw attempted per field goal attempted is 10th in the country, so they get to the stripe a lot, but their free throw percentage is 272nd in the country, so not very efficient when they get there. So, Mike, what about Indiana sticks out to you, and how would you rate this matchup as we head into playing Indiana here on the 3rd?
I think the biggest thing you'd mentioned there in their season to date is that their losses have only come against, top 15 teams. We got a UConn loss, an Auburn loss, a Kansas loss. So losses to very good teams, as you'd mentioned, almost pulled one out against Kansas. So definitely not a team to sleep on. I think this is a pretty good squad. As you'd mentioned, they shoot a lot of free throws, and I think that's because they're a very, their offense focuses a lot on their front court. They play through their power forward and center a lot. So a lot of 2-point shots. That's, a good portion of how they play. They don't shoot threes hardly at ever. Yeah, they're 357th, I think, at this time in 3 points attempted per field goal attempted. So do not shoot beyond the arc a lot. They don't shoot it necessarily well beyond the arc either. They're right around 32%, so nothing crazy there. But yeah, they're going to pound you inside. They're 55% shooting on twos. So that's we know it's pretty easy to know what they're looking to do, and it's up to the Huskers to stop them.
And Mike, Indiana, as you mentioned, they start and end with their forward play. They're 13th in the country in 2-point scoring distribution, having 59.7% of their points come in as twos. They don't shoot the three much. They, like you mentioned, 356th in the country at 3-point attempts per field goals attempted at 25.7%. So they work inside very strictly and very intentionally. One thing of note that, may benefit to our matchup is they give up the three. They're 321st in the country in defensive 3-point attempts per field goal attempt at 42.9% of opponent's shot coming from deep. So something to be said, and I think that might also play into teams not wanting to attack Indiana from inside with their height. This roster is a very, very tallly built one. They're the 3rd tallest roster in the country at an average height of 6'7". So a lot of trees down underneath. So I think a lot of teams opt to shoot from outside, and Indiana is going to challenge you to shoot outside when in doing so. So going down some of their roster pieces, as shooting guard, they trot out Trey Galloway, a 6'5 senior, averaging 11, 2, and 4, shooting 50% from the field, 28% from three. He's kind of a role player that's not a great shooter, and he's only shooting 53% from the stripe on the year. So if we need to foul a guy, he's going to be the guy we go to. But Mike, as we mentioned, their highlights are in their forward play. Malik Renew, a 6'9 sophomore, averaging 16, 6, and 3. He's shooting 60% from the field, 44% from deep. He's their leading scorer, and he stretches the floor. His last game against Kennesaw State, he had 34, 11, and 4. So he's a superstar caliber player at the college level, and a relatively young one at that, being a sophomore. The other guy that sticks out for them very obviously is Kalel Ware, a 7-foot sophomore, averaging 15, 9, and 2, shooting 55% from the field, 38% from three. He's a transfer from Oregon, and he had a stat line of 28, 8, and 3 against Harvard. But ever since then, his scoring has kind of gone down, so maybe focusing a little bit more on Renault's play. So, Mike, what do you take out of their individual players, and who should we watch out for outside of their forwards specifically?
I mean, yeah, as you'd mentioned, the forward play is massive for them, and as you mentioned a little bit, they can stretch the floor. Both Ware and Renew are shooting over 30%. It's not a massive volume. I think they've only shot 16 and 18 respectively 3-pointers, so they don't shoot a lot of threes, but enough to make you respect the shot. So I think that's big for them. I think you're pretty spot on in pointing those guys out, though. They're both sophomores, both going to be a problem going forward, but. For me, the next biggest alert, if you want to be on the defensive end, is Mackenzie Mbako. He's a 6'8" freshman, another big, tall body. As we mentioned, they're a very lengthy team, lots of length, so it's going to be tough inside. But, he's a guy who shoots a lot more threes than the other guys. He's actually attempted the most on the team. He's shot 49 of them. And he's shooting, just under 30%, 29% for three. So not a great rate, but he's going to shoot it. And he's a guy that's, coming in as a freshman. He's trying to adapt and adjust to the college game, but I think it's definitely somebody you got to keep an eye out for.
And Mbako was a 2023 McDonald's All-American 5-star recruit. I've written down here that he's a double-digit scorer and a plus rebounder. So, again, a guy that's maybe young to the game in respect to college, but we'll see him flourish, and I think we'll see him grow a lot throughout the year. I think it's a good thing that we caught them a little bit earlier in the year before he maybe takes some footing. But the biggest question here, Mike, is Xavier Johnson. Their 6'3" senior point guard averaging 11, 2, and 2. Now, he was their starting point guard at the beginning of the year, has not played since November 26th due to a foot injury, shooting 49% from the field and 50% from three-point. Now, the key here is that he was practicing up into the Kennesaw State game, but was not cleared to play. So we've seen him active on the practice court. Be interesting to see it, what we get out of that Big Ten availability report pregame, and that may affect the spread quite heavily, along with obviously the mass news. But Mike, this is a big piece of news because who they are trotting out there right now at point guard is Gabe Cupps, who's a 6'2" freshman, only averaging 3, 2, and 2, shooting 35% from the field and 36% from three. Now, he was 2022 Mr. Basketball Ohio, so he's not a lowly regarded guy in his own right, but just based on the stat line and some of the, the tape that I've watched, at least, he's more of just a get the ball up the floor kind of guy and get it inside and let those guys work. So we'll have to see if Xavier Johnson plays, but a huge piece there, Mike.
Massive to get him back. Anytime you can get, he's an experienced guy. He's a senior. So going from a senior, bringing the ball up the court to a freshman, obviously that's a big change. And you had noted that in the stats so far for them this season. Yeah, big question mark. As you mentioned, he has been practicing though. And even if he could have been available for the Kennesaw State game, I wouldn't be surprised if they sat him out. And I mean, it wasn't Kennesaw State's nothing to write home about, not a highly touted team. So maybe just some extra rest for him. I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the starting lineup for them for this game against the Huskers. So something to be aware of. That's a guy that's, as I mentioned, he's pretty experienced. He's shooting 50% from three, 5 for 10. Obviously he's been injured, and that's in only 6 games he's played. He's attempted 10 threes. So he doesn't shoot a ton, but he's shown that he can shoot it pretty well, and definitely a better guard play there for them. So we mentioned that their forward play is pretty good, but if they can get it some good guard play, they're definitely a dangerous team.
So Mike, Ken Palm is projecting a 78-72 Nebraska win, and Bart Torvik projecting an 81-72 Nebraska win. So Mike, let's put this one at Nebraska somewhere in the realm of -7. Where are you going to go with this one?
Yeah, I think as we had mentioned, the way that their defense stacks up, they want to force you out beyond the arc. They want you to shoot the ball a lot, and you see that in both their defensive point distribution. So opponents, they score 37.7% of their points from three. The opponents do, which if you're having a great shooting night, that's great, and you're hitting beyond the arc, that's going to work out well. Otherwise, trying to go inside among those trees is pretty tough. Personally, I think the Huskers have the shooters necessary to, especially if you have Mast, and we can kind of help. He's been shooting the ball a lot better beyond the arc, but even without him, between Williams and Tominaga, Wilcher's been shooting the ball well. I think we have the shooters to take advantage of that. So I think it's going to be a tough game, especially without, possibly without Mast and with them getting their starting point guard back. I think the Huskers eke it out. I'm going to say somewhere around a 70-67. So the Huskers by 5. I'd be taking the points necessarily, but this is not financial advice, and don't tweet at me if your bet doesn't hit because you took my word on it. So but that's what I got for this game.
So, Mike, I'm going to actually take the +7 with Indiana as well. Obviously, Xavier Johnson brings a little bit more of a three-point threat for them if he is going to indeed play. Mentioned, obviously, he's a 50% three-point shooter in the limited volume he has seen this year, so it adds a little bit of another threat to that offense. Biggest thing to me is, can Nebraska defend low without fouling? We mentioned Indiana very talented at getting to the free throw line, 10th in the country, shooting free throws on 45.6% of their field goal attempts. So they're really aggressive down low, and defenses have been unable to contain them down there without fouling. And obviously, I think Mast is a big 3 to 4 point defensive or difference rather on the spread here. And I think the biggest perk he brings to this is obviously, his 3-point shooting. We talk about it all the time, but where he's played really well this year is defending down low without fouling. He does a great job maintaining verticality. You never really see Mast in foul trouble, so he does a great job, obviously, on help defense and those types of things. So I think Mast is really going to be the key here. I hate to say it's as simple as that, but if we get Mast, I think we get this one. I'm going to predict that Indiana does keep it within the 7, though, and I'm going to predict a final score of 75-71 win for Nebraska. And as I must gloatfully note, I did predict a 91-64 game against South Carolina State, and it ended 91-62. So I have been really hot as of late. I don't know what's going on. I'm not even betting these myself. Maybe I obviously should be, but been hot lately. So that'll round out our Indiana recap. We will catch you on the other side and get you out of here.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
So, Mike, Huskers have started well this year. I think if we just said before in the season when we were doing our season preview, if we could get through the non-conference at 11-2, we'd be really happy with where we're at. So let's keep this going and let's get January started and 2024 started with a big win against Indiana, because we got a tough schedule here coming up over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, if you want to talk about net ratings and stuff in this last win against South Carolina State, I think net ratings are going to really pop off here in January. We got a pretty brutal schedule. I think we got 4 or 5 chances at potentially quad 1 wins. So big start to the conference slate. There's never an easy outing in the Big Ten. It's a very physical league. It's a very deep league. Anybody can beat anybody, it seems like. So excited to see what the fellas do. I'm excited that they're 1-1 in conference. It wasn't the way that I had necessarily planned, but I think the win over Sparty is probably better than the win over Minnesota. So take the silver linings there, I guess. But it's exciting to see what this team can do. As you'd mentioned, in the season preview, we said we'd be pretty happy if we were at this point. It's just funny that expectations continue to grow, and maybe just have to live in the moment sometimes and just be happy with what the guys are doing. So I think that's going to be my challenge over the next couple of days leading up to this game, and before I get nervous right before tip, as is usual. But that's my take. Love to see what the guys are doing. Love to see what they can do in conference.
And that Michigan State win, as I tweeted now, a couple of people had mentioned, well, Michigan State's down this year and they're bad. Well, as it sits right now after their Indiana State win, Michigan State now a quad 1 win for Nebraska on their resume. And I fully expect it to remain a quad 1 win, all things considered. So make sure you follow us on Twitter at Scarlet Shoot Pod, YouTube, same thing, Instagram, Scarlet Shoot Pod as well. We post on Twitter pretty much daily on net ratings, tournament projections, any news of note, anything like that. YouTube podcasts are up usually a day after posting. Mike does a great job with those. Those are always up, and they've started to kind of grow in interest. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube to keep up with those. And then finally, I have decided that we're going to do a giveaway after each conference win. So as long as you share your thoughts in our post-game tweet, you'll be entered to win either a sweatshirt, or I think we may be having rope hats coming soon with our name on it. So another cool little piece of merchandise, and we'll be sure to advertise that as they come available. So make sure you interact with us. Keep the conversation going on Twitter. We've, like I said, been growing really fast, up to I think 150 some followers on Twitter, and we've only been doing this for like 2 months. So obviously really fun to build a community around what we're doing. And always what we wanted to do is be the sounding board for the Nebraska basketball fandom, where you can share your thoughts, positive or negative, throughout the season. So with that being said, thank you for listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. Let's take care of Indiana and go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.